Hell's Point, Part 20. Meet the Countess. The first thing Diane noticed when she woke up was the biting cold. Like hell had frozen over. The room was medieval, lit by large white candles that hung from a chandelier on the ceiling. The chair she was sitting in was set across from the largest bed she had ever seen, with blood-red silk drapes that hung around its edges. A large painting of a battle scene hung on the wall furthest from her. There was even a suit of armor in the corner. Stepping away from the chair, she went over the events of the past few days in her mind. Her husband was lost somewhere, possibly very injured or worse. She had been kidnapped by a man in a black cloak and a gold mask. Then there was the cop who had pulled her from the train wreckage. His arm had been in a sling, and he looked as though he had been badly injured from the crash. Diane shuddered as she began to cry. Everything that had happened was so ridiculous. The train crash, the fire, not to mention the fact that she watched a man get killed right in front of her. It was crazy. Finally, she stopped crying and wiped away her tears. Walking over to a window, she peered out and was immediately caught in the grip of an eerie feeling. Looking up, she saw that the property went up several more floors. Then looking out, she could see the shadow of a large garden maze shrouded in fog. This was not a place she had any desire to stay in for any length of time. She could feel a cold breeze coming from somewhere in the room as she turned back to face it. There was a table in the center of the room. Sitting atop it was an empty wine glass and a decanter filled with some type of red liquid Diane assumed was wine. A small piece of paper with the word "Welcome" written in sweeping calligraphy letters had been left on the table as well. Diane picked up the decanter and sniffed at the liquid inside. It had a pungent coppery stench that made Diane draw back her head in disgust. "Gross," she said, gagging slightly. Setting the decanter down gently, Diane bent slightly to get a better look at the note that had been left. Just then she felt something sharp press into the back of her neck. Instinctively, she quickly stepped away and whipped around to see what was behind her. A woman now stood before her. She looked to be about 35 years old, with long raven-colored hair. Her face was beautiful and pale, showing no signs of age. She was dressed in velvet, the same blood red as the drapes around the bed. She smiled as she drew nearer, holding a long, cruel knife in her hand. There was blood on its edge, and the woman brought it to her lips, tasting it. Diane could feel the blood running from the cut she now had on the back of her neck. The woman's smile only grew wider as she neared. "It is a shame that blood does not age like wine. It goes cold so quickly," she whispered in a sing-song voice, with an accent that might have at some point long ago been French, but was now something entirely unique. Diane screamed and ran for the door. Her hands were sweating, so she had trouble unlocking it. The woman was almost purring as she approached. Her knife pointed directly at Diane's throat. "Please stay a while," she said. "I have so few out-of-town visitors, and new blood is so sweet." Diane screamed again as she finally unlocked the door and wrenched it open. "Leave me alone, you crazy bitch," she screamed as she ran down the corridor and into the darkness, leaving the woman alone with that same soft smile on her face. Stepping quickly towards the bed, she threw the knife through the curtains and poured herself a glass of the red liquid, grimacing as she drank it. "I will need more," she said, the smile fading into a blank, far-off stare. "Soon enough," she said quietly, setting the glass down without finishing it. She walked over to the painting in the corner of the room. In it, men on horses fought one another to the death under a fiery red sky. The ground below them was littered with corpses. Taking a side of the painting in each of her hands, she picked it up and set it down on the ground with ease. Behind it was a flat panel monitor with several switches on its bottom right-hand side. Flipping one of the switches, the monitor sprang to life, showing a view of the corridor outside the room. Then next, pressing a button, she was given a view of the grounds outside the mansion, each view showing a different part of the property. When she finally stopped pressing buttons, she saw a small white room with a simple chair and desk in the middle, a stack of paperwork laid to one side, a computer on the other. Flipping a switch marked intercom, she spoke. "Are you there, Walter?" she asked softly. "Is that you, Countess?" came the reply. "Who else do you think it might be?" she snapped. "No one else but me is allowed to use this monitor, you know that." A balding man with thick round glasses and a full white beard stepped into view. He was dressed in a brown suit and red tie. In his left hand he carried a polished ivory cane. The wrinkles on his face were etched deeply into his skin, and his outward appearance gave him the look of something akin to an old leather-bound book. "My apologies, Countess," he said with a chuckle. "What is it you need?" Touching her fingertips to her mouth, she seemed to be deep in thought. Looking back at the monitor, she spoke in a commanding tone. "Our guests have arrived. All of the pieces are in place. Lead the girl to the maze. After that, things will take care of themselves." Walter laughed again. "It shall be done, Countess," he replied in a deep British accent. "As you know, I can be very persuasive." The Countess turned off the monitor and replaced the painting, turning from it and taking up the half-empty wine glass. "Things are about to get very interesting," she whispered quietly, to no one in particular.